I tell this story all the time. I was 45. I was living my best life. I was looking good. I was feeling good. My energy was high. Um, Everything was great. And I
Hmm.
swear to you, it was like I turned 46. I woke up. I was Tim Allen in the Santa Claus. I had gained 30 pounds. My joints hurt. My sleep was terrible. I've always been a great sleeper. Everything was off. And I
Mm.
didn't understand. I'm like, I don't, nothing has changed as far as a massive, change in my diet or a change in my routine or a traumatic event happened, none of that. And so I was talking to my mom and I'm telling her all these and I don't understand what is going on. Why is my body doing all this? And she says, "Oh, it sounds like you're in perimenopause." What is
Right.
that? I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Welcome
What
to
is
the
that?
CoachMD Podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. And that's why I started the Coach MD podcast, because I wanted to invite people on my program that kind of, in a way, took their healthcare into their own hands because, we could only do so much as a doctor. And it's my feeling that to be a doctor, and really kind of what I never liked to do was treat people. If you ask a doctor, oh, what do you love about what you do? So many of them will say, oh, I like to treat patients. And to me, that falls flat because treating people is not what I think I should be doing, what my role is, or what doctor's role is. Doctor's role are to be educated, to know as much as you can, to keep up to date, and to be the best doctor that you can. And being the best doctor that you can is really empowering people and not just looking at them as sick patients, but empowering people with the tools so they can take care of themselves. And I like to get people on my program who really go outside the box of conventional medicine, outside the textbooks. And what they do is they learn as much as they can with the science that's available outside of the conventional one-way myopic thinking that so many doctors, unfortunately, are really anchored to. So my guest today is Karen Cerezo, who kind of did that because she was going through something and she needed to learn about it. And I learned the most from my patients who were going through stuff. They'd come to me with information that they had learned on their own, and we'd research it together. And 9 times out of 10, or more often than not, I would learn a lot from that in their own investigation, and a lot of those things we would implement in their own life. So, Karen, thank you so much for
Thank
agreeing to be
you.
on the Coach MD podcast. And yeah, I want to introduce my audience because I know so many women out there and who are going to be interested in what you're going to be talking about. It's such an important topic, and of course their loved ones, their spouses, their partners who are going to be affected by what they're going through. So, share with us what your expertise is. I know my audience wants to hear that.
Sure. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I think this is awesome. And I love what you said when you talked about your role as a physician. And it really is guiding versus just putting a band-aid and
Mm.
or short-term solution and really trying to figure out how can we solve this so it's solved or at least minimized as much as possible without just putting a band-aid on it. So I love that. And that's definitely one of the things I'm hoping for women. So I'm Karen Cerezo, and I am a health and wellness coach. I have a certification as a health coach. I'm certified as a personal trainer, which I also do with women over 40. So I have a very special class of ladies that I work with
Hmm.
that are amazing.
Nice.
I'm also a nutritionist, a behavior change specialist, and a senior fitness instructor, which I like to tell people is literally anybody over 50. So myself included.
Me too.
Um, and when I first started out, I was just doing personal training. And then I
Hmm.
realized, okay, people are, being able to show up to the workouts. The component they're missing is the nutrition.
Mm.
So then I got certified in nutrition. Then I realized, there's a lot of mindset that goes with this and limiting beliefs but also like holistic. Are they sleeping? What kind of things are they doing to reduce their stress? And so that's why I got certified in health coaching. And so I put those together for a while until I hit a wall. Just
Mm.
like you said, we find that when we realize we need them.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the way I trained women versus the way I trained men, the way I trained women in their 50s versus the way I trained women in their 20s until
Mm.
I turned 46. And it was like my whole world was upside down, and I was experiencing all of these changes in my body, and I had no idea because I didn't change my behavior.
Hmm.
So what was happening? And so, like you said, and that's when I just took a deep dive into trying to figure out what is going on and why am I suffering from all of
Yeah.
this?
Right. Yeah, no. So, it's very typical, and I train. I work out 3 or 4 days a week, and my preferred workout is a CrossFit workout. That's our gym is a CrossFit gym, and I work out very a co-ed class, and many of the women are in the age group that you're describing, and so
Mhm.
um, when you say you hit a wall. Um, Explain to my audience what that meant, because a lot of people will say, come on, it's not, it's just something you did something different, that
Right.
caused that. But I know that that's not the case. So if you could
It
just talk a
wasn't the
little.
case. It was
Right.
horrible. So,
Yeah.
I tell this story all the time. I turned, I was 45. I was living my best life. I was looking good. I was feeling good. My energy was high. Um, Everything was great. And I
Hmm.
swear to you, it was like I turned 46. I woke up. I was Tim Allen in the Santa Claus. I had gained 30 pounds.
Mm.
My joints hurt. My sleep was terrible. I've always been a great sleeper. Um, I might have narcolepsy. I don't know, but I could fall asleep anywhere.
Yeah.
But now I was having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep. As far as like my joints hurting, I've never had issues with knee pain. Now my knees were hurting. My running training was suffering. I was training
Mm.
for a race. I wasn't doing very well with that. My strength workouts were suffering. I had to, taper back on the weights. My eyesight changed. My
Mm.
skin was dry. It was itchy. Everything was off. And I
Mm.
didn't understand. I'm like, I don't, nothing has changed as far as a massive, change in my diet or a change in my routine or a traumatic event happened. None of that. And so I was talking to my mom and I'm telling her all these and I don't understand what is going on. Why is my body doing all this? And she says, oh, it sounds like you're in perimenopause. What is
Right.
that? I'm like,
Yeah.
what is that? First
Yeah.
off, all I knew was menopause
Hmm.
as a term. And I'm
Yep.
thinking, well, that's down the road. And that's just hot flashes. I was completely clueless. And so
Hmm.
that's when I was like, okay, I need to get educated because if I am somewhat trained in, living this healthy lifestyle and I've had access to all of these resources that a lot of other people don't have access to, and I've taken these trainings and I've taken these classes and I don't know what to do.
Mm.
How am I expecting the average woman who all of a sudden starts to feel this as well? How is she supposed to navigate this? And so that is when I really got into what is going on in midlife, because midlife really does start, before we
Yes.
even hit 40, if you look at how long people are living. But so let's say
Yeah.
45.
Yep.
What is going on in that time period when I'm, between 45 and 55? And what is perimenopause? What does that mean for my body and what should I expect? And I had no idea. And it's one of those things that as women, I can only speak for as women.
Mm-hmm.
As women, we have the talk. Hopefully, you have the talk either with your friends or at school or with your mom about, starting your menstrual cycle and what to look for. And then when we start to go and we get older and we're ready to, have babies, then we have all of those talks about
Mm-hmm.
fertility. And even to some degree, we have some talks about postpartum care. And then it just stops. We
Mm-hmm.
don't talk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know what to expect. And obviously, most women didn't know what to expect. And so that's when I really got involved with learning everything I could, reading every book I could get my hands on, going to, researching and doing webinars and workshops and trying to take it all in. And that's when I really flipped my health coaching to just focus on women in midlife, helping them
Mm-hmm.
navigate menopause. It's overwhelming and it's scary, and you feel like you're doing something wrong. And in reality, it's just trying to listen to your body. What does it need as it's changing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so important because like you said, it kind of happens overnight, and your doctor's not going to help you. I hate to, I hate to say it, but well, I shouldn't say not. There are doctors, and I know that because I've listened to some of the things that you've talked about, and you can't find doctors who will help you. But the vast majority of my colleagues are not educated in this area, and so before 2000 and was it 2002 with the Women's Health Initiative came out, and it was in April, I think, of 2002. And in April 2002, let's say March 31st, April 2000 and March 31st, 2002, doctors were just as a reflex like that, not thinking, not having a thought, they would put their patients on Premarin and Provera. Those were
Yes.
those
Yeah.
were the prescribed estrogen and progesterone because the feeling was you're in menopause, your estrogen now is not being produced, your progesterone is not being produced, so we're just going to give you Premarin, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what that means,
Hmm.
and Provera, we'll talk a minute about what that means. But then, let's say April 1st, 2002, headlines. You're going to give your women patients cancer if you
Yeah.
give them that. And so
There was a
overnight,
huge breast cancer scare.
right,
Yes.
overnight, millions and millions of women's life quality went down the toilet, and doctors say, so can't do anything. So women developing more osteoporosis, more depression, more weight gain, more fatigue, more heart disease. Okay, we'll talk about that in a
Hmm.
minute. Just all
Hmm.
these things because overnight, one over aggressive academic NIH, ivory tower guy and his brilliance. And I'm saying it was one guy, literally one
Hmm.
guy who made that statement and said that this is what our studies show, misinterpreting the data. So that overnight changed everything. So when you started your quest and you had this, and the weight gain is true. So I know many women, including I don't want to give too much information, but close to me, okay, who doesn't change, nothing changed, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden, whoa, like where did this come from? And so it's important to know that as a woman ages, the ovaries are not going to produce the hormones that are produced to make a woman fertile, to make a woman uh, procreate. And so then are we, are women supposed to shrivel up and die? Well, in the old days, yeah, but
Yeah.
we have learned what aging looks like in a woman and what can be done to kind of hack that in a way. So tell us a little bit about what you learned as you were doing this investigation.
I did read all about that study, and then obviously it has we flipped the script. You know, the same thing we do on eggs. Eggs are good, eggs are bad, eggs are good. Should I eat eggs? Am I eating it?
Right,
What am I doing?
right, right.
And so same kind of thing where it
Yeah.
came back and they're like, oh, just kidding. It's really okay
Right.
for you to take hormone replacement therapy. And so there was, because it was such a big deal, and it's still, you know, it's still in the back of women's minds, even women that, you know, in 2002 weren't concerned about this at all.
Hmm.
But it's still, you know, one of those things that's still is kind of a stigma, and it's scary. Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? Um, and I think that is a fear that sometimes women don't even approach it because of the old studies, and doctors maybe not up to date on the
Hmm.
information or haven't done their own individual research. They might not even offer it because they don't want to put themselves in that situation where they might feel like they're offering something that's not beneficial.
Hmm.
So it's taken some time, and obviously more and more people are talking about it. More women are talking about it. They're sharing their story being on hormone replacement therapy, and so I notice a lot, you know, on the accounts that I follow on Instagram, podcasts that I listen to as well, that more people are talking about it openly. They're sharing their positive experience with it.
Hmm.
And it really is, you know, an individual thing. Is it for everybody? Definitely not. You need
Hmm.
to look at what is your medical history, what's your family's medical history, because
Hmm.
that does come into play. How old are you? What are your symptoms? And then you can make an educated, you know, get an educated decision based on that information. But it should be something that's explored, and it should be something that's talked about, and it should be something that doctors that are treating women in midlife should know about.
Hmm. Yeah. So getting, into kind of the granularity of hormone replacement therapy, talking a little bit more about it, is that we'll talk right now about estrogen and progesterone, because those are the two main hormones that a woman that controls the menstrual cycle, and that really is protective for women, for cognition, for cardiac, throughout premenopause, throughout the earlier years. And women, it shows that women who are postmenopausal, women who have gone through menopause, have the same risk factor, the same incidence of cardiovascular disease as men do throughout their life. So the only thing that has changed is that estrogen has gone away. So the idea that estrogen is somehow harmful is a mischaracterization, and it comes from the idea. And I'm telling you, if you surveyed doctors, 80% of them still will say no. If you give them, will you prescribe hormone replacement therapy to women who are menopause? They will answer no, at least 80%, not knowing, because of that study, thinking that
Mm-hmm.
they're going to give their female patients breast cancer. And so, where does that come from? Well, it comes from the idea that early breast cancer has estrogen and progesterone receptors. They're estrogen and progesterone receptor positive. So what does that mean? It means every breast cell, every breast cell that a woman has a estrogen receptor and a progesterone receptor. Every breast cell. Most cells in the body have women's body have a progesterone and estrogen receptor. So the it many women who are diagnosed with breast cancer, and that's a whole other discussion for another day. But they'll say, "Oh, mine was estrogen positive, progesterone positive," and that's a good prognostic sign. Now, why is that a good prognostic sign? So I like to use common sense in medicine. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I was never. I'll admit, I was never the. Wasn't number one in my class. I wasn't. I didn't on rounds in the hospital. I wasn't the one to spit out the 12 different differential diagnoses that I memorized from Cecil's textbook of medicine or whatever. I wasn't that guy. All right. But what I did do, and I thought I was good at, was apply common sense to my life, to my the way I interacted with my patients, And so common sense tells me if estrogen, if it's a good prognosis because you have cancer, it means it must be in early stage. It must mean that it looks like a regular breast cell. And that's the devious nature of cancer. It's not that it uses the estrogen receptor and the progesterone receptor as a growth factor for the cancer, but it looks it it the breast cell, cancer cell, wants to mimic a normal breast cell. So when the immune system comes in and tries to destroy that cancer, it's going to say, "Oh no, it has the surface that looks like a regular cell. It has the estrogen receptor, it has the so we're going to leave it alone." So
Mm,
what doctors think is that, oh, if you sprinkle on estrogen and progesterone, it's going to make the cancer grow. So
yeah,
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 so that's the one thing. And the other thing is the estrogen and progesterone that doctors were giving women was synthetic. And so
yes,
like Premarin is pregnant mare urine. So
yeah,
right. So I think it was Letterly or Wyeth Pharmaceutical, the makers of Premarin, they would have collect the urine of pregnant horses and they would extract the estrogen and make it into a pill, Premarin. So I had a patient who I was putting on hormone replacement therapy once, and she called me in a frantic on a Friday night. She had just seen her OBGYN and uh, said, "Oh, I got to talk to you, Dr. Glassman." So I call her back and she says, "Oh, my doctor said you better not take that stuff. It's going to give you cancer, and it's terrible for you." I said, "Well, if you have four legs and a tail, maybe it would be okay for you, right?" That's what she's telling you, but because that's what she would
right.
prescribe you. In fact, I'm sorry, that's no that I got that wrong. The doctor actually said, no, don't take that stuff, which is called bioidentical. We'll talk about that in a second. But because that's what I was giving her. She said,
Yeah,
no, if you're going to take hormone replacement, you have to take this one, Premarin, because we know. And I said, well, if you have four legs and a tail, maybe that's what you should be taking. That just came out, because that's what it was. And the Provera was synthetic methylprogesterone. And those two items do act differently in the body. So tell us a little bit, because I know that that's probably what you were discovering in your quest when you started hearing and learning a little bit about the hormone replacement therapy.
Um, I I definitely did a lot of trying to figure out what was the best. And then, just not only am I trying to figure out what's best for my clients and what's best for the women that I'm
Right.
talking to, but also what's going to work best for me. And like you said, either one, the doctors you go to are not necessarily equipped for this season. They might have been the best doctors to deliver your babies or your best, general care, whatever, but maybe not this season. And so when I went to my doctor, I was really fortunate that she was pretty well versed in this particular season. Her wheelhouse was menopause women.
Mm,
And so after doing my blood work and all, we decided that hormone replacement therapy was best for me. Now, talking to other clients, that's not necessarily been what they have been suggested or referred. There's so many different options out there, and I think it's important that you do your research and you ask,
hmm
what are the different things that I can use? What are the side effects? What is the convenience in my life? Is it something that's I'm going to have to make a significant change in my lifestyle? Because obviously we want to make sure that whatever we're doing is something that we can do for long term or
mm.
however long we need to be doing it. So, um, I was very fortunate to have a doctor that gave me the options, knew, what the benefits were, and allowed me to pick what was best for myself.
Yeah, that's great. And so a lot of times, when I was learning about this, and again, I had to learn about this. Nobody taught me about it. I had to do basically what you did, okay?
Yeah.
Because I knew nothing about what are called bioidentical hormones. And
Yes.
bioidentical hormones really mean they're identical to your own biology. So the estrogen that a woman is taking in bioidentical hormones is identical to what's circulating in the body. And it's made up of three different types of estrogen. There's estriol, estradiol, and
Mhm.
estrone. And so the predominant estrogen that is produced in a woman is estradiol, and so, but it's also for those people who might be. It's also most bioactive, so it can work the best, but it could also have the side effects as well. So, a lot of doctors who prescribe bioidentical hormones, and when I was prescribing, I would uh, prescribe a what's called a biest, which would be a combination of estradiol and estriol. And I would
Mhm.
prescribe it in a cream, skin cream rather than a pill. Some doctors prefer a pill. The only difference between a pill and the cream is that a pill has to be broken down by the liver first for it to be bioactive. So the cream goes right in and is more active. And the progesterone, again, it could be a cream, it could be a pill. Difference between a pill, it sometimes can help women if they're struggling with sleep issues, can sometimes be beneficial. Um, so if you can kind of tell, because the weight gain, I think for most women is certainly the hot flashes and the kind of the maybe the brain, a little bit of brain fog, whatever might be disruptive to sleep. But the weight gain, I would think, would be the most disruptive initially or the most disturbing for many women. So, how do you kind of, with your holistic approach, with your fitness and the nutrition and education on the hormones, how do you fit that in?
Well, I think the weight gain is such a big one because one, it's so noticeable in the sense that someone doesn't necessarily know that I'm having a hot flash. They don't know that I'm, suffering from brain fog. They don't
Right,
know that I'm not sleeping or whatever it is, or my skin is dry and itchy. I mean, they might
right,
notice, but
right.
for the most part, I think the weight gain is such a big one just for our self-confidence.
Hmm.
And especially when you know you're doing the things. I'm eating healthy, I'm moving my body, I'm doing all of these great things for myself. Why is it not paying off anymore? And so the weight gain is a big component that a lot of women come to me for.
Hmm.
Um, with regard to that, number one, obviously we want to have, a current, some kind of a current blood work. One of the things we want to look at is our cortisol levels. We want to look there and see, if you're suffering from chronic stress, that fat is going to stick there. You're going
Hmm.
to, you're going to be struggling with weight loss. The other thing is we become insulin resistant as we go through menopause. And so we need to check your blood sugar levels. And then how is food reacting, you know, with your body now? Is it being used for energy? Is it being stored for fat? That
Mm,
is probably one of the ones that I'm
yeah.
struggling with personally. We need to look at your thyroid. Is something affecting your metabolism? And so there's a lot of components there. So once you can kind of get a physician that's willing to look at those numbers, do those tests, that's one way that we can start to get a little bit of a handle of
Hmm.
what's going on here. As far as fitness and nutrition, I always tell people number one, fitness, find something that you love because you're going to come back to it. So we
Hmm.
want to bless our body with some type of movement that's enjoyable. Now, there's mixed thoughts on is too much hit a bad thing? Is it putting our body in that fight or flight where it's not helping us lose weight? It's actually hindering that weight loss and it's kind of out. I am the kind of person that I would rather you focus on strength training and maybe lower impact for your joints. Walking is such a good one for your heart. I know people plenty of women that like those HIIT workouts. They like that high intensity. And so my suggestion would just to be to maybe taper it down a little bit. We don't want to necessarily get rid of it unless you're completely, it's just completely painful. But we want to make sure that we're doing something for our cardiovascular health. But we really want to be focusing on that strength building. We want to make sure that we're maintaining muscle mass. We want to make sure that we're focusing on our bone health. We want to, put osteoporosis out there and say, hey, listen, this is something that I want to avoid. What are the things I can do to do that? I'm a big component for women doing strength training. I think that's such an important one. And it's good for your mental health. It really is. And it's good for your confidence. So fitness, there's, a couple different things in there. So, getting in something that's good for your cardiovascular health, getting something that's in there for, building muscle, maintaining muscle. The last thing you want is to ask, your neighbor to help you get off the toilet. You want to be strong enough to get your body up and, off the couch, off the toilet, off the floor with your grandkids. We need to maintain that. And then nutrition, I always get asked, and I'm sure you get this all the time, what's the best diet? Well, none.
Right.
We don't need to diet. What we
Right.
need to do is actually fuel our bodies. And so growing up in the 80s and the 90s, we were literally taught to starve our bodies. Cosmo told us that we should be eating 1,200 calories. We all know that that's not accurate. That's not the way to go. And so how are we fueling our body? First off, let's eat. And second, what's the best diet? What's the best eating plan? I like to say,
Right. Yeah.
following the Mediterranean diet is probably one of the best things you can do for women in midlife. I mean, it's got everything there. It's got your protein, it's got your healthy fats, it's got your carbs. And again, we can't steer away from carbs. And that's always like a catch-22. Oh, but my insulin and carbs, and we just need to make sure we're eating the carbs that are going to work with our body. And so learning, what kind of carbs work with your body. The other thing a lot of women notice as far as weight gain is bloating. And so as going through this, as your estrogen is changing, it's also changing your microbiome. So you might notice that foods that you used to love to enjoy, you can no longer enjoy. So I always tell people I used to love thick crust pizza. We lived off of that when our kids were little. I can't even have that near me. All of a sudden I blow up. And so I can still enjoy pizza, but now I have to go with thin crust pizza. And you start to notice that things that didn't affect you are now affecting you, causing issues with your, your gut health. And that's another, component of that weight gain and that inflammation in your body.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said about the HIIT workouts and the stress. And I didn't know, and again, this comes from common sense, right? I didn't know anything about that topic until I put a continuous glucose monitor on my arm, a Freestyle Libre, which you can get from your doctor for prescription. I think you might be able to order it online. It's a continuous glucose monitor that monitors your blood sugar over a 2-week period. And I did that probably about 3 or 4 times. And I noticed that when I would go to the gym and work out, do a CrossFit workout, my sugar would spike. So I don't eat anything. I usually work out in the morning, and my typical eating style is intermittent fasting. That works for me. I never eat before noon. So in the morning, I just drink fluids, or I take some powder mix, whatever that's non-caloric, and that's what I do. So it's not from the sugar. It was totally from the workout, the stress, if you will, from the workout, because the body produces cortisol as a stress hormone. Now, it's interesting though, because I still think that it's a good thing for you, because it does what's called the hormetic effect. See, the hormetic effect means that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All right. So it's kind of how homeopathy works. You take a tiny little bit of a toxin or allergy shots, you take a little bit of the allergen, and it makes you, it primes you. And similarly, those kind of HIIT workouts, they do that. They prime you. So it's a short burst of cortisol. And when I said that the blood sugar spikes, it does spike, but it goes down quickly within less than an hour. Whereas when a blood spikes after you eating, it will typically stay elevated for about 2 hours. So it's a
Yeah.
different type of stress. But I agree with you. You have to arrive at a balance because
Mhm.
sometimes you could be working out 4, 5, 6 days a week and not really being that fit. And so the couple reasons are one, it could be the cortisol spiking too much, and two, you are eating over and above what you need to satiate, what you need to replenish. So I guess those are two areas that I think are important also. What do you think about that?
Well, they are, and it's so individualized, and it's one of those things where is it okay, for client number one to do 2 or 3 hit workouts doesn't have a negative effect. But what about client number two that already has, high stress job,
Mm,
or, there's something major going on in their life right now that's this season is very stressful for them. Um, and then they're doing the same workouts. Does it affect their body differently? Um, I can't say necessarily because that's definitely, not my particular wheelhouse, but it would be something that I would want to address and see how can we switch some of this stuff around, and let's work with it. Let's try it out. Let's see if you notice a difference if we change things up a little. Unfortunately, so much of menopause is putting puzzle pieces together without actually knowing the puzzle.
mm,
And, and you could say, well, but my mom had this and that's not helping me, or my sister's menopause experience was X, Y, and Z. And it really is so unique for everybody. And there's so many different things that are going, there's so many different factors. Your nutrition is factored into it. Your family's health is one component. It's a small component, but what is your lifestyle? Are you moving your body? Are you eating? Are you sleeping? And so those are all things that we have to look at. So yeah, it really is individualized. So that's something that I would, when working with a client, is looking at, well, what are you doing on the days that you're maybe not doing those types of workouts,
mhm.
and
So,
see, what
yeah.
works
So
for them.
what are like for yourself, or let's say one of your clients who's been really successful, what are the kind of the combination of hormonal interventions and that you've seen work, either for you or one of your very successful clients?
I would say the biggest thing, if I were to pinpoint where most of them are finding success, is starting in the gut and looking at, how is your gut health, and what are some things we can add? And it might be as simple as, let's add a probiotic. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
just little things, little daily habits that you're starting with that really add up. And so I would say starting with gut health has been probably one of the best things for
Hmm.
my clients. And then we just kind of go from there. Okay. And now that we feel like this is under control, let's look at this element. Let's look at your sleep. Let's look at your stress. Let's look at, your self-care, and self-care, not necessarily pedicures, but are you getting your
Right.
regular checkups? Are you taking care of your body? And so looking at components like that, but I would say the first place, gut.
Hmm. Now, the for me, yeah, I like interventions that work, that you could see
Mhm.
a measurable or a noticeable change before and after you start. Now, for instance, um, women in menopause, it's well known, and this goes back to how a woman's partner is going to notice this in vaginal dryness. So, vaginal dryness
Mhm.
is something that all menopausal, postmenopausal women experience. And I know from, prescribing over the years that estriol, estriol cream suppository 2 or 3 days a week basically cures that. So what that does is it provides estrogen, the vaginal tissue is no longer getting estrogen. So its message is, okay, I need to dry and shrivel up. There's, no babies
Yes.
coming this way anymore. There's not going to be any procreation going on. So I'm going to go bye-bye. But the estriol, which is so for women or doctors who might be afraid to prescribe stronger estrogens, that's one uh, prescription that I would tell all doctors to prescribe to the postmenopausal women is estriol for vaginal health. And it decreases we're not only talking about intimacy, we're talking about decreasing UTIs and infections and things of that sort.
UTIs are a big one that
Yeah.
a lot of people don't necessarily talk about. And I don't think enough people do talk about vaginal health. And so that was definitely one of the things I learned as I was going through it, that there's stuff that you can use when you want to be intimate, but you should also be doing moisturizers, kind of like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And just like you moisturize your face, your body is dry, your skin is dry. You would moisturize your vagina as well. And I have told women, go look at these products, see what you think, see if that helps a little bit with everyday stuff, not just when you're intimate, because
Right.
it can be irritating. We've had conversations with women where it's, maybe TMI, but it feels like paper cuts. And
Yeah.
obviously that doesn't feel comfortable. And the last thing you want to do is be intimate with somebody when you're already having pain and it's not comfortable, it's dry, it's irritated, or you might have a UTI and you're just miserable. Number one, you've got to be open and honest.
Hmm.
And I am so lucky to have a husband that's amazing, and I can tell him all of these things. I'm like, probably don't want to know this, but this is what's
Right.
happening.
Right.
And being able to be honest and open, so he knows, number one, it's not him.
Hmm.
I promise it's not you, it's me.
Right. Right.
Um, it's not him, but we could work on it together. And so he knows, that this is what I'm struggling with, and I need you to be a partner with me as we find solutions. I need you to support me, and I need you to understand what I'm going through right now. And having those open, honest conversations is so important,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
only with your partner, but with your doctor. And I think you're right, as far as a lot of women don't necessarily want to say this is what's happening. Either it's embarrassing or it's just not something that they talk about. Maybe they feel like, well, I just have to power through it. So you bring up a good point that affects you, and it affects your relationships. And there's
Yeah.
no reason at 55 that we still can't be intimate.
Hmm. Yeah. And it becomes a vicious cycle because that's such an important part of a relationship. And when that's missing, it really it affects all aspects of life. And
Mhm.
I can't imagine, I started, look, I went to medical school, I did my residency, I was in practice for, I'd say 16 years, okay, before I even knew anything about what we're talking about here, about
Yeah.
women's health, except for
Yeah.
Premarin and Prevera, right? It was because of that women's health initiative, a pharmacist were compounding pharmacists who compounded women's bioidentical hormones contacted me and asked if he could have a seminar in my office. And that was the first time that I heard anything about this stuff.
Yeah.
And just think, I mean, I went to a good medical school. I did well. I mean, I did the things you're supposed to do, but is that really doing a service to your patients and my female patients and menopause? Now, it's not, again, it's no mystery that the cardiovascular risk for women equals men after menopause. It's no coincidence that the risk of osteoporosis increases. So the combination of nutrition that you're talking about, fitness and strength training, And that's why I am biased towards CrossFit. It's not for everybody, but it does incorporate the weight training with the functional movement and and the aerobics. And so in my it's not perfect for everybody, but I just think of the workout I did this morning and the women in the class. Most of them, I would say, or at least half of them were in that age group that you're talking about. And so I know that that is good for them. And I know it's good for me. And so when you also start addressing the fact that your body is no longer producing the estrogen, no longer producing the progesterone, and then go to somebody and say, okay, is this right for me? Should I be replacing it? And, we talked about with men, testosterone replacement therapy, which I have a little bit of an issue with because I think it's overprescribed rather than underprescribed because most doctors in this area, in this kind of bioidentical space, will say that you want to get your testosterone level in the thousands because that's what it was when you were a teenager or in your 20s. So I did my own little experiment, and so I would take blood on men who were in their teens and 20s. Rarely would I get somebody over 1,000. They were all
Oh,
hovering in the upper hundreds or whatever, mid to upper hundreds. So, that's, kind of going for something that may not be. But
well,
anyway, that's a different,
I gotta say,
yeah,
just on that real quick,
yeah,
I do not want my husband in the thousands. I'm tired.
right.
Don't do that.
Yes, right. Yeah, and right.
Please don't do that to him.
Right, exactly. But on the other hand, it won't even make him more virile. A lot of times when it's over, it makes him like to start angry. Like I'm not saying your husband, but
Yeah,
many
right.
men get
Yeah.
aggressive or they get acne or
Yeah.
things of that sort.
We're
But
turning him into the Hulk.
right, exactly. Over that, right, of course. So yeah, so I think this is a very important topic. I really feel that unfortunately women there's so much information out there now that women are not going to get from their diet. They're going to get from podcasts like this,
Yeah.
and they're going to have to learn on their own, contacting practitioners like yourself, people who have done the work, have done the research outside of the conventional model, which is good for sickness. Okay, acute illness, very good for it, but for the everyday uh, quality of life, I think that people are going to get more information this way, honestly,
Yeah. Yeah.
that can really help them.
I agree. The when you're talking about postmenopausal, I do notice. So when I started talking about menopause, on Instagram, my Facebook, all of that with my clients, my girlfriends, all that, about 6 years ago,
Mm.
there wasn't a lot that I saw on my feed of menopause. Now, obviously, it's all over. I understand my algorithm probably shows me a little bit more than the average person, but I am noticing more people are talking about it. There's more books out there, podcasts are addressing it. So that's amazing. The
Mm.
one thing I don't hear a lot about is postmenopause. What
Mm.
happens when I am my estrogen is gone? I think so many women think, well, you're good.
Yeah.
It's all over. You're fine. Your cycle's done. Your hot flashes are done. Life is glorious. Go live the next 30 years. And that's so not the case. Like now is when you really need to look at my bone health, my
Mm.
osteoporosis, risk, cardiovascular disease. And so I definitely hope that now that we're starting to put menopause and perimenopause in the forefront, and more conversations are being had, we also start to include that postmenopause in the discussion as well, because I think that's a component that's being left out. But I'm glad that at least we're getting started. So that's a
Yeah.
plus. We're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think for those women who are afraid of taking estrogen or progesterone or bioidentical hormones, keep in mind that the incidence of breast cancer it's highest in postmenopausal women.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
that again, that was a common sense thing that said, well, if it's higher in postmenopausal women, why would you be afraid? Because when a woman's estrogen is the highest, their incidence isn't as high as it is when it's the lowest. Wouldn't either be a non-factor or maybe a protective factor? Um, and so that's something also to consider, I think, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen,
And that's one of the things they do talk about is, if you get on it early enough, there is a huge difference than women that either don't do it or do it later
mhm,
in their menopause journey. And so it's good to start that conversation right away.
yeah.
And one of the things that I always tell women is number one, it's okay to ask your doctor, do you feel equipped to treat me in this season? Is this your strength? Do you feel like you need to refer me out to somebody that might have
Mm,
more of an expertise in dealing with menopause and midlife and the hormone fluctuations? And number two, it's okay to get a second opinion. You might love your doctor, but if you feel like you're not being listened to in this moment, you're not getting the quality care, you're not getting all of the options, get that second opinion, get that third opinion, get that fourth opinion if you need it. Open up the diet. I see women posting all the time on Facebook, open Facebook pages, not just like women's health that I belong to, Facebook groups,
mhm,
but just, regular
mm,
city groups. Does anybody have a doctor that's good with hormones? And I love that. Have those
mm.
conversations.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah. And so don't be afraid to, ask. And so I think we are getting to that point where it's okay to ask and say, I want the best quality care.
Yeah. Yeah. I always, I would tell my patients that if there's ever a time when you think that you're going to hurt my feelings or that you're going to insult me, then it's time that you should start finding another doctor because this is not about me. And
Right.
if a doctor is insulted about you saying, asking that question, then you got to start thinking that that may not be the right doctor because that's you don't want a doctor to have that to be acting on ego or pride. That's not the interaction you want to have. A prideful doctor is a dangerous doctor because
Yeah.
that doctor's more self-interested than interested in you. So
Yeah.
that's something that I think that's great advice. Wow. That's really good.
And we would do it for our kids, which is so funny. Like we would go and ask the questions. My child is dealing with X, Y, and Z. Can you help? Here's the information I'm seeing. Here are the patterns I'm seeing. And if you feel like you're not being heard, they're not treating your kid, they're not giving you the solution, you would go somewhere else. You wouldn't
Hmm.
even question it. You would do it for your dogs.
Yeah.
So
Right.
why do we not do it for ourselves as women? Um, we just kind of like, okay, all right, I guess that's fine. I guess, whatever they say goes. And
Yeah.
no, we need to be able to be a self advocate.
Yeah, great advice. So, yeah, thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your
Well, thank
expertise.
you.
And,
Thank
I
you.
think was such great information to share. And I'll, post links that get in touch with you. You'll email those to me, and I'll have those in the description. Yeah, so, this is great information for everyone out there, and especially women who are going through
Yeah.
menopause, postmenopausal. And until next time, thank you for joining. And as you know, I'm Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD, and urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and especially in soul. Bye for now.